Welcome to week 13 of 16 of the 6-inch Summer Squares series. Now, technically it's fall, and actually at the date of this recording, it is the first day of fall, and I took this picture in the morning, this moon that is still existing in the morning over the mountains really close to the house, and I'm like, oh my God, it's so pretty. I'm so excited for fall. And so I went right into my little cabin, and I found some fallish fabrics. Again, from my friend Deb, who just gave me a truckload of fabric. Woohoo! So exciting. Thank you again. I love everything. I just want to sit in the middle of it and roll around. But anyway, so this week we're going to do curved piecing. And I want to do 4 3-inch blocks, put them together for a 6.5-inch block. So I took freezer paper and I cut 2 3.5-inch pieces of freezer paper and I pressed them together so I had a nice template material to work with. Okay, so I've cut my 2 pieces of freezer paper, 3.5 inches. So I'm going to make 4 little blocks, little Improv curved pieced blocks, and then put the 4 together and make a 6.5-inch block. So the only reason I did 2 pieces of freezer paper pressed together is just a nicer template. It's just a little bit, it's a little bit heavier to use for a template. So I'm going to draw some Improv lines on this. I went through my fabrics that my wonderful friend Deb gave me, and I picked these 3 out. I think they look great together. I really don't know how this block is going to turn out, but that's what Improv is. So I'm just taking this little 3.5-inch square, and I'm just going to make some gently curved lines here. So, gosh, I don't know. Let's do, we'll start at a point and maybe just do a little arc here. So that'll be 1 piece of fabric. And then I want to go like directly in the middle. So maybe, gosh, I don't know. And of course, as I'm doing this, I'm thinking, well, maybe I need 4 fabrics. Classic. Try to make everything hard on myself. Let's just maybe do that. And, oh, what the heck. Let's just do 4. I can find a 4th that I love. Okay, so in order to piece, it's almost like thinking through paper piecing. I'm going to piece this and this together, and then I'm going to put this piece on, and then I'll put this piece on. So now what I want to do is I'm going to take a picture of this so I can refer to it, but I'm going to cut these templates apart and choose the fabrics for each section. Okay, so I've chosen my fabrics. I brought in this little brighter yellow one that I love. I think it'll go great with this main fabric. So this is a fabric I chose first, and then I just chose the 3 fabrics that I think might go pretty. We'll see. So as far as drawing them out, like I will be drawing this with the Frixion pen on the wrong side of each fabric. Obviously there's not a lot of fussy cutting to do on this. I'm just gonna throw it on here and place that since that's a nearly solid. Same with this one. There's a lot going on here, so I'll probably just choose like something that's got a lot of interest and not focus so much on always having this motif. You know, I'll probably do 4 different motifs. I think that'll look really cool. And then on this one, I probably will, just to keep the grid working the same, I'll just put this straight edge along a line here and then draw this one out. And then the same with this one. I'll probably put, just make sure that one of these is centered inside this. Let's see if I can do that. Yeah, so this is just a strip. I just love this fabric. It's so sweet. Deb, you have such incredible taste in fabric. So I'll probably just put this on a line, making sure that I've got, well here, let me just go ahead and do this one. I want to make sure that I've got a 1/4 inch seam allowance because remember we are going to be piecing these. So yeah, let's just go straight in the middle here. I want that to be right sort of in the center, so I'm just going to go like this. and then draw the outline. Now, of course, you're going to need to do this 4 times if you're making a 6.5 inch block. This is only good for the 3.5 inch block that we're making. So just to be clear, we're making 4 3.5 inch pieced blocks, then putting them together so we have a 6.5 inch. Now I'm outlining this in a Frixion, which is great because you can see it and it will never bleed through to the front of the fabric. The only drawback is you really can't iron your block until you've got all the pieces on, because you're going to just erase all of the Frixion lines that you did. It's not the end of the world because you can always go back and draw the template on any part that you erased, but you know what, who wants that added work? So we'll just try to remember not to press it. So now when I go to cut this piece out, I am going to cut a 1/4 inch seam around it. So let me go ahead and do that. Okay, so I'm going to cut this out with a 1/4 inch seam all the way around. Okay, and then just do the same for your other ones. I'll probably just cut all 4 of my pieces on all 4 of my fabrics. Okay, so once you have your fabrics cut out, and you'll have 4 of each one to make this 6.5 inch block. If you noticed, when I was drawing my templates out, I had my templates face up, which means my block, when I piece it together, will be the reverse of the original image. I didn't really think it through because I'm doing improv, and it's not really a picture, it's more of a just sort of lines. So I just kind of dove in and started, and I was like, oh yeah, if you want your block to look exactly like the picture that you drew, you would actually put the template upside down. So it doesn't matter here. In fact, it's kind of led me to a thought of the next 6 inch block might be really cool if I did it the other way, where I put the template down, and we'll see if we can get kind of the same block but in a mirror image, which might be really awesome. So I just kept going with it. I realized it after I did this one, and like I said, I don't really have an end result here, so I just kept going and I was just consistent. So either way, just pick a way where your templates are face up on the wrong side of the fabric, your block will be reversed. If you put your templates face down on the wrong side of the fabric, your block will look exactly as you drew it. So either way is completely fine in this case. If you were doing something that you didn't want to be reversed, like maybe it's an image or something, a very specific image, then you would of course put your templates upside down and trace. So we're going to put 1 and 2 together, and we'll piece this very shallow little curve here. So what we're going to do is stitch on the lines. So I just lift them up, and I know I'm going to start sewing here, but what I really want to make sure is that these points will match each other. So I'm going to put a pin in this point, and then I'm going to stab the second fabric through just to make sure that I'm at that point. I know I'm going to have to sort of bend the fabric, so I'm just going to put this pin in here for now. Then I work my way down, bending the fabric over my finger to put a middle pin in. And so let's see where we're at. I'm going to put a pin in this line here, flip it over, and you see how it's just above the line? So that means that this is going to have to come down here a little bit. Really, when you're stitching on the curve, I think it's so much easier than on the machine because you have so much control. Okay, so that's really, really, really close. But what I'm going to do is just take the pin out and just stab it a little bit above. Now it's coming directly out on that line in the back. And just pop the pin there. Now to start it, you could pin it, but what I'm going to do is just take my needle and thread. It's just a regular piece of Aurifil thread on a needle. I'm going to put this in the point, look back here, and it's just a little bit off. I'm looking for this needle to come out on the exact point so I can start the stitching. So that means I can manipulate these pins later as I stitch. So when you're stitching on a curve, even if it's by hand or machine, you want to make sure that you're really just focused on the line just ahead of you. We're not going to go crazy and try to pin it perfectly all the way down because we're going to adjust those as we go. So what I'll do is I'll stitch 3 stitches, tiny little stitches. 1, 2, 3, making sure that they're all on the line that I drew. I'm going to look back here and make sure that they're all on the line that I drew. Now this last one is really close, but it's coming off the fabric a little bit. So I'm going to just take the last stitch out. Everything's on the line, pull it through, and then once that's secure, you really can make as many adjustments as you need to. All right, and you can pull the fabric down away from the stitching line and the edge. And then let's continue along and see how we do. 1, 2, 3. Okay, here I'm way below that line. So I'm going to take that back out, squinch the fabric up a little bit. Now, if we had focused on cutting perfect 1/4-inch seams, we could just match up the edges. But that's not the method we're using here. We're using the line method, which means you stitch on the line. And as long as you stitch on the line on both sides, your piece will come out perfectly every single time. So it's worth taking just a little bit of extra time here to make sure that you're on the line on both sides. And then that looks great. So I'm perfectly on the line, perfectly on the line. I'm going to pull those 3 stitches through. Okay, and then at this point I can just take that pin out and readjust as I need to, moving the fabric away from the piece, away from my stitching line. Because all we really care about right now is this line right here. 1, 2, 3. Before we pull it out, it's right on that line, so I'm happy with that. And even though this seems like it takes a long time, as for me, trying to piece on a machine on curves, I can do it, but I don't like, when I make a mistake, I have no idea what's going on underneath, and so I end up ripping out every once in a while. And this there is no ripping out because you're making sure that your seams are on the line on both cases. Now I'm just below the line here, so I know that this fabric, in order for me to meet it, has to come down just a little bit. And it's not always like this. I mean, sometimes, just depending on the severity of the curve, your 1/4-inch cutting, sometimes it just comes out perfectly every single time, but at least you know. Okay, now look, I'm right exactly. I hope the light's hitting that properly, but I'm right on that line. So I know I'm in really good shape, that these 2 pieces are going to fit together just like a puzzle. One, and I'll take that pin out just to get it out of the way. And then of course stop right at the point. Go down at the point once again. And I'll just come up just before it, and then I'm going to make a little knot there. I'll do is I'll just tie a knot for get ready for my next piece. Okay, now one of these is going to be on the convex and one was going to be on the concave. So before I even open this up, I'm just cutting every 1/2 inch or so just to let the fabric seam allowance spread out as I fold this up. So when I fold up, I've got that perfect little curve there, and I know it's going to fit together great as I continue my piecing. Now, as far as what side to press the seam allowance on, in this case, because I don't really have a preference on what fabric is raised up, I'm going to press the seam allowance towards the concave, which will allow the fabric to spread. You can certainly press, like if you want this really beautiful main fabric, focus fabric to stick up, you can certainly press the seam underneath. Then this fabric is risen up above this one. But for me, that's not really a part of the design aesthetic that I am focused on right now, just because of the nature of this particular piece. It's not a graphic, you know, it's just pieced improv pieces. Okay, so now we're going to stitch this seam to this seam. So we just pick it up, and same kind of thing. Now this is a deeper curve, a little bit longer, so I'm going to use a few more pins. Pop that right into the point here, and into the point there. Now before I secure the pin, I'm going to turn my fabric because I know that I'm going to have to match these seams up. And this is a temporary pin placement, so okay, just popping that in, and then I'm just continuing along, running my fingers down the seam line. So let's put that in here. See where it comes out the other side. Nope, way below the line here. So that means I'm going to undo that pin, come up a little bit here, redo the pin, all right, and let's see what that's going to look like. I'm right in the line. I'm just about an inch away here, right on the line. That's perfect. So I'm going to secure that pin. Now as you run your finger down the seam line, you're going to notice a lot of fabric gathering here, which is fine. Just go ahead and let it gather back behind the seam line. Nothing really matters back this way behind the seam line. That's going to take care of itself once you get it all stitched up. All right, so about another inch away. Little low, so all I'm going to do is just rise up perfect. Let the fabric gather behind the pins. In fact, it's easier too, even if you just took a little tiny bite of that pin right there, then the fabric can gather even better. Pretty close, about 2 threads away. There we go. And like I said, we're going to be taking these pins out as we stitch, so this is really just to keep it in place as you're stitching along. And then in the beginning, of course, I don't put a pin, I put the needle in so I can just go ahead and start. So I'm going to put the needle right in the point, and we'll see what it comes out back here. Nope, a little bit off, and that's the nature of those curves. So really this all is just prepping ourselves so that we can stitch on the curve really successfully just by going 3 stitches at a time. Okay, so I'm in the point there, I'm in the point here, and now I will stitch the first 3 and we'll see how we do. See if those lines match up. Nope, I'm just a little bit above that. So on these curvy lines are a little they're tricky. So So just be patient, you'll get it. I'm gonna move that down just slightly and we'll try it again. And once you start the line, it gets a lot easier too. But a big, intense curve like this, it can be a little tricky to start it. Okay, so I'm in the point, and let's try this line, see how we do. Much better, much better. I'm right on that line, so I know I can pull those 3 stitches through. Perfectly on the line. We can stitch these fabrics right into submission. I'm going to hold the seam allowance from the previous piecing away from the piece and stitch right up to that seam allowance. Now I'm going to move the seam allowance to the right. See all the fabric gathering under here? That's good. Just let that gather. Pop the pin right on the line and see where we fall out. Right on the line. Yay. Come back up. And just make sure your seams aren't caught in your stitching there. Perfect. And then we can just continue right along. Right on that line. Okay, so once you get to the end of that, once again, we're going to clip. I clip every edge before I fold it up. It's just easier so that the fabric can spread as you open it up on this curved seam. Okay, and I'm going to push the fabric out towards this new piece. One, so the fabric can spread easier along that, the seam allowance, but also two, it eliminates bulk. If I were to press it this way, then I've got a bunch of bulk right here that isn't necessary. Okay, and then the fourth piece we'll stitch on. So again, and this is our deepest curve yet, but it all works the same way. Just take it slow. The pin goes in the point. Pin goes in the point. Before I secure the pin, I'm going to lift the fabric because I know that the raw edges may not be perfect, but they're real close. So I'm going to pin this right here and just take a little bite of fabric. Then, about an inch away, let's see how we're doing. Perfect. In order to manipulate this fabric really well, you're letting the fabric gather back here. And you're piecing this really around your finger, letting the fabric curve the way that it wants to. There's no reason to wrestle it right now. In through the point, let's see how it comes out here. Not quite. So I'm just going to simply lift the fabric up, put it on the point, start stitching on my line and seeing if I can't grab that line on the back as well. It's really fast, actually. It's much faster than you think. And what a great take and go project, honestly. Perfect. All right, so just take it really slow, 3 stitches at a time, stitch on your lines, and I'll come back and I'll show you how to put these two together. We're going to look at some different options. This is the fun part because it's kind of like a build your own puzzle with these. So I'll stitch the other 3 blocks just like this. I will press them out, and just so you know, these will actually end up to be not 3.5-inch blocks yet. They're 4-inch blocks because we added a seam allowance on top of the seam allowance. I find it's just easier to do that and trim the block down. And when we get to the next step, I'll show you just exactly what I mean. Okay, so now once you have all of your blocks stitched together, your 3.5-inch blocks, this is what I was talking about having that extra seam allowance around. So what we do want to be able to piece together to a 6.5-inch block is 3.5-inch blocks, right? Because 3.5 and 3.5 is 7. And then once we lose that 1/4 inch on 2 of the blocks, we'll have 6.5, and then that will take us to our 6.5-inch block that you can put into a quilt or your journal or just use as a decorative piece. So what you want to do before you hit an iron to it is just make sure that your original outline here will fit into that 3.5-inch square that you originally drew out. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to press them. I'm going to, once it's perfectly flat and pressed and I have the seam allowances exactly where I want them, I'm going to take this 3.5-inch ruler. And of course, the creative grids are great, but if you don't have that, just make sure you have a ruler that will ultimately render you 4 3.5-inch blocks. So see, I've got to cut that extra seam allowance off. And then I'm going to play with this, take a photo of one block, and then put it in Procreate and turn them different ways so I can decide which way I want them stitched together. Okay, so here's the finished 3.5-inch block. So what I did is I took a photo of that and I put it in my iPad in a program called Procreate, which is awesome. I would imagine you can also do this in Photoshop, or if you're a Mac user, I would recommend Myhre Pro. It's a phenomenal program. I think it's like 20 or 30 bucks, way cheaper than Photoshop, and it can do maybe not as much, but I don't know how to do all that extra stuff beyond what I already know and what I need. So Myhre is the program for me, but I use Procreate on my iPad all the time. So if I put these together so that the star, the blue star pieces are in the middle, I am going to get this block. And then if I put 4 of this block together, I'm going to get this really cool image where I've got circles and the star pieces. So I love that. If I put the block together so that the windmill is in the center, I'm going to get this image. And if I put 4 of this image together, I'm going to get a quilt that looks like this. Now, this is just if I were to use this block over and over and over again. It may be that I just could use this as a border, or one block in a great, amazing, different patchwork quilt. I could put these blocks together like this and have a pretty cool border. I think this block is actually really cool. I think this whole quilt, a border like this would be really amazing. But remember when we talked about me flipping the template images, and I was thinking, oh, I wonder what it would look like mirrored. So if I were to flip my templates upside down so that the drawing side, the side I drew on, was upside down on the wrong side of my fabric, I can make a mirror image of this block, and wait for it, it's amazing. Boom. So for sure, I'm going to be making mirror image of these blocks because I think this is so phenomenal. With my love of mandalas and mirror imaging, I'm so glad that I wasn't even thinking when I did the template drawing. It just occurred to me that, oh yeah, I could do a mirror image, and this is incredible. So I love, love, love it. So yay, I'm super happy with this. I love curved piecing by hand. I think it's super fun, and you've got all the control in the world. But for now, just to finish out this block and keep it in my journal, I'm going to print out a photo of the mirror imaging to remind myself how much I absolutely love that. But basically, just to make the square 6.5 inches, I'm going to fold this to this, stitch it 1/4 inch, this to this, stitch it 1/4 inch, and then once those are stitched, I'm going to piece them together along this seam here. And that should render me a 6.5 inch block. So I know I don't really have to do that on camera. I'm just going to do that and then take a photograph of it. If you can piece on a curve, you can piece a straight line, right? But I love this block as it is. I could just see this being like cornerstone blocks even, with strips of maybe each of these different colors coming off. a million varieties of fun to be had here. So I'm really excited about this block, and I am going to get my curved piecing on. I hope you've enjoyed stitching along with me, and I can't wait to see your curved piece blocks. Got a couple photos come through. This is Debbie's fused flower. So pretty. I love this block, the way she did the stitching. She loved the thread that goes with the fabric colors, so she had made her stitches a little bit bigger. I think it's a great choice. It's awesome. And I love Mary's Fabricami, the fabric folding square. She did that block on the point and did this incredible rickrack beading. Really awesome. Thank you so much, you guys, for sending your photos, and I just get so happy when I see them. So yay. And just before finalizing the video, I got these two photos from Sarah and Mary. Darling photos of their fabric embroidery. So Sarah had used Turkish embroidery for the yellow. She had me fooled. I thought she had couched yellow yarn on this one flower. And then she did the long and short shaded stitch on the orange and yellow flowers, and it just adds so much. So well done once again. And then Mary had this darling squirrel fabric. She outlined the squirrels. She placed these sweet little pearls in the little flower buds, and then did some extensive embroidery on the right flower, and it's just divine. So thank you guys again for following along and posting your photos. You guys are amazing. And look at them all together. Look at all the blocks we've done together, you guys. I think this digital unity quilt is just lovely. So I haven't decided what I want to do next time. I have a couple ideas, but I guess I'll surprise us all. So we'll see you then. Have a great week. Happy stitching, and take good care. Bye-bye.